Nothing screams like we're in the business of winning a championship like signing Odell Beckham Jr. The Miami Dolphins with one of the biggest free agent acquisitions we've seen in years. We got Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, OBJ, and Tua as their quarterback. Yo, bro, Tua got no excuses. Miami is trying to dethrone the Chiefs, and it's obvious. I don't think OBJ is washed. I'm seeing on Twitter a lot of people trying, the level of disrespect for today's athletes is ridiculous. I saw a lot of posts on Twitter with people shitting on OBJ signing. People just like, they're just dismissing it like it's a fart in the wind. And OBJ still got some years left, maybe 2. This is scary for the Dolphins. We're going to get right into it, but Miami's not playing. Miami's not playing, bro.
At the end of the day, we have good players here. Mike, Brandon, and I will have a lot of discussions.
OBJ's not washed.
We'll talk with Steve as we get through here, and we'll try and keep as many of the players here that we can.
I gotta admit, watching the Miami Dolphins manage their salary cap situation this offseason was nothing short of impressive, but now they went out and signed quite possibly the best player they could have signed to be their wide receiver 3, and at the very minimum, a great locker room guy, I think. Before we get to the content, we have a lot of content coming for you guys today, so make sure you drop
OBJ's not gonna save the day. You know what I mean? He's not. But when you get Tyreek, Jalen Waddle, it doesn't hurt to have OBJ if he's your worst option. At least you could depend on the receiver that could catch the ball. You know what I mean?
Subscribe and turn on our notifications.
Tyreek is
channel grow. Now that we get all that out of the way.
Hold on, before we even get into this, Tyreek and Jalen Waddle is going to open up the field. I know it's going to sound crazy for OBJ, right? But I'm just saying, people had 1,000-yard expectations for OBJ as being a number 1. He's not going to be the number 1 guy. He's going to be number 3, obviously. But for number 3 to be guarded by the nickel corner or the number 3 corner on the teams he's going to be going up against, you got to like those matchups where especially Tyreek is going to be taking the top off the defense. And if OBJ got anything left, which I think he possibly got 2 years, this might make a little difference. A little. I'm not delusional with it, you know what I mean? I'm a little biased, though. OBJ's my guy.
What's going on, everybody? Entering this offseason, the Miami Dolphins knew that keeping their top talent would be an uphill battle. Now, the NFL salary cap did increase to over $255 million for 2024, which is a little bit more than $30 million over last season, but the Miami Dolphins still began free agency more than $38 million over the cap, which was the league's 3rd worst cap situation, and they were one of 7 teams who were over the cap. And even with a much better cap situation than originally expected, Miami still faced a huge disadvantage in free agency, and they were one of those teams that had to cut some of their key players in order to clear some cap space. Going into this offseason, they had 26 players who were scheduled to become free agents, including multiple players in the defense's front 7. Even their general manager, Chris Grier, had to address this reality in the aftermath of the Dolphins' playoff loss.
At the end of the day, we have good players here, and everyone will have a market. We're not really right now concerned about where we'll be in March, salary cap wise. I think, Brandon Shore, Max Napolitano, we've had a lot of conversations. They've given us a lot of flexibility with multiple options of ways we can, be creative. And so hats off to them just, through their work and grind on things. And so Mike, Brandon, and I will have a lot of discussions, and we'll talk with Steve as we get through here, and we'll try and keep as many of the players here that we can.
So the Dolphins got to work and immediately made some moves. They released defensive end Emmanuel Ogbah less than 2 years after signing him to a massive 4-year contract extension. This move itself saved the Miami Dolphins over $13 million, but it also cost them a valuable pass rusher who bounced back after an injury-plagued 2022 season. That same day, the Miami Dolphins told their longest tenured defensive player, a player that was considered to be one of the best defensive backs in the NFL just a mere 2 years ago, Xavier Howard, that he would also be released. This move itself saved the Miami Dolphins $18.5 million in cap space by officially releasing him after June 1st. Just 2 years prior, Xavier Howard signed a record-breaking contract extension after publicly requesting a trade. But the Dolphins weren't done there. They released linebacker Jerome Baker in order to save just under $10 million, a player that was perceived to be the heart and soul of the Miami Dolphins defense during the previous 6 seasons, and he even agreed to initially take a pay cut for the team for year 7, but he couldn't agree with the team on how steep the pay cut would be. The Dolphins for year 7.
Look at this. The heart and soul of a team. He took a pay cut the previous year to save them bread over 10. Agreed to take a pay cut from 10.8. Like, that's crazy. And they still X'd him. So, don't do these businesses no favors. You see it on television all the time. Stop giving billionaires discounts. Take what you could get, bro. Just to get cut. I wonder if they're going to compensate him on the back end. That shit crazy.
But he couldn't agree with the team on how steep the pay cut would be. The Dolphins would then get to work on adding new talent to the roster. One of the splashiest additions that they've made was signing tight end Jonnu Smith to a 2-year contract worth up to $10 million. They would then restructure 4 contracts, including Jalen Ramsey's, to clear just under $29 million in cap space. But at the same time, reality would hit the Miami Dolphins very hard. They would lose safety Brandon Jones to the Denver Broncos, and probably the hardest pill to swallow. They would lose safety Brandon Jones to the Denver Broncos, and probably the hardest pill to swallow was when they lost their defensive tackle Christian Wilkins to the Las Vegas Raiders on a 4-year, $110 million contract with nearly $85 million guaranteed. Wilkins and the Dolphins had contracts before the season.
$80 million for a defensive tackle not named Aaron Donald? Nah, bro. Raiders really put $80 million in a DT. Oh, what?
The hold-in during training camp, and the Dolphins elected
you better be able to dictate the game.
Guaranteed $22 million, which also makes sense because there was no way that they would be able to beat the Las Vegas Raiders offer. But don't get me wrong, this was a huge loss for the Miami Dolphins. Christian Wilkins was just a season removed from a record-breaking season with 98 tackles, which was the most ever by a defensive tackle, and he owned the 8th highest run-stop win rate since he entered the league in 2019. Now, don't get me wrong, there's a huge
8th highest, got him $80 million.
knock against Christian Wilkins for his lack of sacks, but fortunately for the Dolphins, help was on the way. The Dolphins would sign Shaq Barrett, a premier edge rusher in the NFL a few seasons prior that has been declining in recent years, to a 1-year prove-it deal worth up to $9 million. The hope was that he would be able to fill the gap left behind Andrew Van Ginkel, who departed to Minnesota. And probably their best addition was signing Jordan Brooks to a 3-year contract worth $26 million to replace Jerome Baker. He's set to have a significant role for the Miami Dolphins and is more than capable of filling the hole that Jerome Baker left behind. But what about offensively? How could the Miami Dolphins make sure that if they were in a situation like they were in last year in the Ice Bowl versus Kansas City, they'd be able to make the most of their offense? A team that was memed for the fact that they weren't able to defeat the premier teams in the NFL. We've even seen memes calling the Miami Dolphins the Dallas Cowboys of the AFC, which, as a Cowboy fan, I have to say, is one of the worst insults you could ever give to a team in the AFC. But it's not really much of a stretch. The Miami Dolphins are notorious for being able to put up 70-point games against one of the worst teams in the NFL, but whenever they face off against a team like the Kansas City Chiefs or even the Buffalo Bills in Week 4, they just don't show up. The Bills put up 48 points against them in Week 4 of this past season, but then they're able to defeat the New York Jets 30-0 in Week 15, and their season concluded at the hands of the Kansas City Chiefs, a team that Tyreek Hill consistently likes to trash talk despite them doing just fine ever since they moved on from him.
Chiefs Kingdom, when the Miami Dolphins come to Arrowhead Stadium this year, guess what we gonna do? Guess what we gonna do? I hate to throw up the peace sign against y'all. I hate to do it, but guess what? I'm gonna be y'all worst enemy that day.
So how does this team improve offensively? Maybe you're pointing the blame finger at the fact that Von Achan wasn't healthy in the latter part of the season, or the offensive line wasn't healthy. Maybe it's the fact that Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill get shut down in these games because the Kansas City Chiefs, after all, had one of the best defenses in the entire NFL this past year. So what is the Miami Dolphins' solution to getting some help on offense? Well, one player that has been consistently linked to them throughout the entire offseason is none other than Odell Beckham Jr. Now, Odell Beckham Jr. has had one of the most unique careers I think I've ever seen out of a wide receiver. A player that, in my opinion, throughout the first 5 seasons of his career, was one of the most dominant wide receivers in the NFL. But it seems like the moment OBJ got to Cleveland, his career sort of fell off of a cliff. You could blame Baker Mayfield for that. You could blame the Cleveland Browns offense for that. You could blame Odell Beckham Jr.'s availability for that. But we all know what would happen. In 2020, OBJ's dad would promote a video where Baker Mayfield Mayfield would always miss Odell Beckham Jr. whenever he was wide open and just
crazy.
not throw him the football. The result, eventually OBJ and the Cleveland Browns agreed to part ways. Odell Beckham Jr. goes to the Los Angeles Rams, shows that he's capable of being that same dominant wide receiver once again if he's utilized properly, and wins a Super Bowl. But unfortunately, he would tear his ACL in the Super Bowl. So he would miss 2022. He would sign with the Baltimore Ravens.
I don't care what anybody tells me. If you watch that Super Bowl, just the first quarter alone, OBJ was setting the tone against the Bengals. Like, you could make the argument, if he plays 4 quarters, he's probably the MVP of that Super Bowl. I'm talking about, like, OBJ came out, like, just on fire, bro. And worst case scenario is a torn ACL, son, and just not meant to be, but...
in 2023 on a 1-year, $18 million contract. But in that season, he wasn't
surprised
much
by
of
that
a
deal.
factor. And this is despite his quarterback winning an MVP. So now at the age of 32, there's a question of whether or not OBJ can still be that #1 wide receiver. Could he be as useful as he was at the time when he was with the Los Angeles Rams? Does he still have some juice left in the tank? Does he still have the same explosiveness? Well, the Miami Dolphins are willing to give it a shot, because according to Dove Kleiman, Odell Beckham Jr. and Kim Kardashian have reportedly broken up after 7 months of dating. Wait. No, that's not the news I want to get to, you guys. According to Ian Rappaport, the Miami Dolphins are expected to sign Ravens free agent wide receiver Odell Beckham Jr., sources tell me, and Tom Pelissaro. A new home for the speedster as Miami's offense just gets faster. Now, I have a lot of issues with this report. One is the fact that you're calling OBJ a speedster still, but the #1 concern I had about the Dolphins' interest in OBJ was how much would they pay Odell Beckham Jr.? Last year, OBJ got the Ravens to pay him $18 million. So if the Dolphins were thinking of doing the same thing, I would think it's a terrible deal. But in this case, they're signing him to a 1-year deal worth $8.25 million. He took less than was offered elsewhere, but wanted the fit. I think this is a home run for both OBJ and for the Miami Dolphins. In the case of the Miami Dolphins, you get probably the best wide receiver 3 you can possibly get to pair with Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill. Jalen Waddle has to be in heaven, man. Imagine being in a locker room as a wide receiver with Odell Beckham Jr. and Tyreek Hill. That's gotta be so cool. You know for a fact Jalen Waddle grew up watching these two. In the case of OBJ, he probably took less, in my opinion, because he's playing for Miami and there's no state income tax in Miami, so it's probably going to all factor out financially for him. This is a huge reason why Tyreek Hill decided to play for the Miami Dolphins over the New York Jets, because New York has a crazy state income tax. But I also really like the fit for OBJ. I had questions about how useful...
Damn, Jet fans, y'all really could have had Tyreek Hill if it wasn't for the location of your city. Jeez. Tyreek on the Jets with that defense? And Rodgers? Oh, nah.
Odell Beckham Jr. was going to be in the Baltimore Ravens offense with Lamar Jackson. And it's nothing against Lamar Jackson, man. It's just historically Lamar Jackson hasn't been the most wide receiver friendly quarterback. And this is part of the beauty of Lamar Jackson's game. Last year he had over 4,500 all-purpose yards, but 881 of those yards came on the ground, whereas he threw for 3,678 passing yards. You go to Tua Tagovailoa, who isn't really known for scrambling, who is coming off of a season where he threw for over 4,600 passing yards, 29 touchdowns, and 14 interceptions. I think an 800-yard season is actually possible for OBJ in these circumstances. And I think it's a great deal for the Miami Dolphins. You get quite possibly the best wide receiver 3 you can get, and for OBJ, who should see significantly more volume than when he was with the Baltimore Ravens.
Not even close.
The Miami Dolphins are going to be a problem to stop defensively if their wide receiver core can stay healthy. And in my opinion, Tua has shown to be more than capable of getting his wide receivers the football. So I give it A+ to both sides. I think it's a perfect fit, and I think we might even be in store for an MVP caliber season from Tua if he can stay healthy. Let me know in the comment section down below, especially if you're a Dolphins fan. How do you feel about this? Aside from that, I'm your boy Mike. I'm dropping our mic until our next upload.
Stop it. Like, I was with you, Mike, until you dropped MVP and 2 in the same conversation. Until Patrick Mahomes calls it quits. You know what I mean? We're not buying into that. Did Lamar retire? Yo, but the Dolphins are going to be a handful, bro. When your worst receiver is OBJ, you're kind of winning. You know what I mean? Took less to play with them weapons. He doesn't have to be the guy, like I said. Hill is going to take the top off the defense. You're leaving your nickel corner. Imagine your third worst corner has to guard OBJ. in a system where you know they're gonna get him the ball. Like Miami's up. Like this was a win by Miami, son. Can't even front. They're in my division. Don't like them personally, but I could respect the moves that they're making because my Patriots don't know how to make any moves. It just is what it is. But I'm gonna holler at you guys next video, man. I'm really getting tired of talking about these other teams. I'm waiting for my team to make a move. Bust a move, man.